to see a show of hands. Who honestly read the epistle that Helen put out this week?
It says 1 to 21. It says 1 to 21.
Great. For those of you who didn't, she asked in this story is in the Bible, Brian, correct me, 4 or 5 times? Twice in John and all the other Gospels. So one of the things she wrote in the epistle was to ask the question why the young boy had barley loaves. And the answer that she gave is that barley was for poor people who couldn't afford wheat, to have bread made out of wheat. This is John chapter 6, verses 1 through 15. Feeding the 5,000. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the sign that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up to the mountaintop and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" Jesus said this to test Philip, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get even a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, who was Simon Peter's brother, said, "There is a boy who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now, there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself.
Pastor Helen sent a video intro for the video that she selected for us this morning. As I said, we might not see her face, but she's here in her words. So the intro from Pastor Helen. I had been in my first solo appointment to a Central Valley church less than a month when I preached on this passage from John. Hopefully you got the epistle, and if not, there are copies out in the narthex, and read about the nuances of the Gospel's rendition of the story of feeding the multitudes. The number varies from gospel to gospel. I won't go into what I actually said in that sermon, but I will just share that even though I prefaced my words with, "This is my interpretation, if yours is different and mine upsets you, come talk to me." Well, they didn't come and talk to me. They wrote a letter to the Residence and Ministry Committee, a committee which held my full ordination in their hands. The committee turned it back to the Staff Parish Relations Committee, and the district superintendent met with us all. Needless to say, this was a very traumatic experience for me, but it also pushed me to grow. I will share more with you in the coming weeks about exactly what I said. The bottom line is that we come at this thing we call faith from very different experiences, which means we will read these stories differently. I truly believe that God is big enough for all our ways of making sense of these ancient stories. I never failed to get tired of watching this video. I think she probably would want to say, I never get tired of watching this video from Rob Bell, former pastor of Mars Hill Bible Church in Michigan. Hoping you see the connections and pay attention because there is going to be a short quiz after the video.
I recently heard somebody saying that they were pulling into a parking lot and the space closest to the building opened up, and they said it was a sign that God was with them. And then, probably about 2 weeks ago, I heard somebody talking about two people who'd been sick, and the one of them had been healed. And they were talking enthusiastically about how God had intervened to heal the one person. And the whole time I'm thinking, yeah, but what about the other person? I mean, they didn't get healed. Where was God? Why didn't God intervene with them? And then, it was last night. Just last night, I heard somebody say that they had been in a store and they'd seen something they really wanted and it was on sale. And they said, this just shows how good God is. If God can help people find things on sale, then why doesn't God spend time doing things that seem more important, like earthquakes or famines or sickness? When you think about God, when you hear the word God, what images come to mind? Like this old man with a long white beard, and he's behind a curtain and he's working these levers. He's healing some, and then he's finding parking spaces for others. See, for many people, their concept of God is built around a God who's outside of everything, a God who essentially is somewhere else, a God who made the world but then stands back and watches it from this other vantage point, a God who's there and then from time to time comes here. The problem with this concept of God is you end up having to even prove that this God even exists. And so what happens is we start with real life, we start with existence, what we all agree actually exists, and then people end up arguing and debating and discussing whether there's a God somewhere else who has something to do with this. But the writers of the Bible seem far less interested in proving whether God exists, and far more interested in talking about what God is like. Like in the book of Exodus, a man named Moses wants to know God's name, and God responds, I am. And then later, God reminds Moses that when Moses heard God's voice, he saw no shape or form. I mean, God is beyond anything our minds can comprehend. What's it mean to have a personal relationship with this kind of God? I mean, that's like hard to get your mind around. I mean, now I believe that God listens and God cares and God's involved, but I find the whole relationship idea hard to comprehend. And then loving this kind of God, what does that look like? What does it mean? And how do you do it? And when I think of God, I hear a song. It's a song that moves me. It has a melody and it has a groove. It has a certain rhythm. And people have heard this song for thousands and thousands of years across continents and cultures and time periods. People have heard the song and they've found it captivating. And they've wanted to hear more. Now, there have always been people who say there is no song and who deny the music, but the song keeps playing. And so, Jesus came to show us how to live in tune with the song, like that he's the way and the truth and the life. This isn't a statement about one religion being better than all the other religions. I mean, the last thing Jesus came to do was start a new religion. He came to show us reality at its most raw. He came to show us how things are. I mean, Jesus is like God and taking on flesh and blood. And so in his generosity and his compassion, that's what God's like. In his telling of the truth, that's what God's like. In his love and forgiveness and sacrifice, that's what God's like. That's who God is. That's how the song goes. The song is playing all around us all the time. The song is playing everywhere. It's written on our hearts, and everybody is playing the song. See, the question isn't whether or not you're playing a song. The question is, are you in tune? Like it's written in the book of Acts. It says that God gives us life and breath and everything else. God is generous. So when I'm like selfish and stingy and I refuse to give, I'm essentially out of tune with the song. Later, in one of John's letters, he says that God is love. Unrestrained, unconditional love. So when you see somebody sacrifice themselves for another, for the well-being of somebody else, it's like they're playing in the right key. That's why it's so inspiring and powerful. They're in tune with the song. Now, some people know all sorts of stuff about music. They know stuff about pitch and modes and keys and instruments, and so they can hear things that maybe other people don't. They hear subtlety and nuance in the song that other people might miss. They appreciate things others might miss, but it's also possible to be so caught up in the technical aspects of the song that you miss the simple, pure enjoyment of the song. I mean, there are people who talk as if they know everything about being a Christian, and yet they can seem way out of tune. And then there are others who would say they don't know much at all about the Christian faith, and yet they can seem very in tune with the song. I mean, I've met lots of people who struggle with what it means to have a relationship with God, but they haven't lost faith and love and hope, and truth and compassion and justice and generosity. I mean, maybe you have this sense like you have no sort of relationship with God because of all these things, these ideas you have about what that means, all these things that you've been told about what it is or what it isn't. And an infinite, massive, kind of invisible God. That's hard to get our minds around. But truth, love, grace, mercy, justice, compassion. The way that Jesus lived, I can see that. I can understand that. I can relate to that. I can play that song. So may you come to see that the song is written on your heart. And as you live in tune with the song, in tune with the creator of the universe, may you realize that you are in relationship with the living God.
So hoping that you all took notes and have your answer sheets ready. I think there's probably no right answers to these questions. Pastor Helen starts our discussion with, so turn to a neighbor and just give your initial reaction to this video. Make sure everyone gets a chance to share. Can you believe in God and be out of tune with the song? Does it work the other way around?
Yeah, I hope so. Say that again.
Can you believe in God and be out of tune with the song? Can you hear the song and not quite
Sometimes we don't.
align with it? Does it work the other way around? Can you be in tune with the song and not believe in God? And finally, what do you think is more important to Jesus? To believe or to do? What do you think is more important to Jesus? What we believe or what we do? Faith without works? There's a question for you to discuss. The next step on our journey this morning is paying for our tickets. So I'll give a offering invitation from Pastor Helen while the ushers get ready for us. We have gladly taken more than our share of the world's good. Let us give in proportion to the blessings we have received. May the church be at the forefront of feeding, healing, caring for, and loving God's people. We are the church, the body of Christ, making a difference in the world. And don't forget your loose change to lose malaria.